Hello, in this video I'm going to be demonstrating the installation of Ricochet's aluminum skid plates on a Textron Wildcat XX. Now the first thing you need to do before you start the installation is to remove all the factory protection. There's just bolts on the top here and then a few down here. Remove all those bolts. You've also got 3 bolts on the side. On each side you need to remove for that plate to come down. Once you get everything off, you can go ahead and reinstall these 3 bolts on the side to hold your the plastic on your the side of the machine here secure, so you can reinstall those. And then before we actually install any of the plates, you need to take the M6 tap that we're providing and make sure it's the M6. We're providing 2 taps for this set. Quarter 20s in the rear because the holes weren't, they're a little big for a 6, so we had to jump up to a quarter 20, but it's a 6 on here, so make sure that you're using the correct tap. Before you start to tap out the holes that we need to do, you want to put a little oil on it, WD-40, motor oil, pretty much anything will do. And you're going to see 4 holes in the frame right up on this front bar. Those are the 4 holes that we need to tap. The hole's already there. We don't need to drill anything out. It's the correct size for the tap. So you're just going to take your tap and just start cutting through the thread. Try and keep your tap as straight as possible. You don't want to put any side load on it. You risk breaking the tap if you do that. And if you break that tap, you're in for a fun time. So you want to make sure you keep that tap nice and straight. If you feel it starting to tighten up or bind on you, actually back it off and that'll break the chip, and it should let the tap free up so you don't end up accidentally breaking the tap. It's pretty easy to do. There's one done already. So we're going to do that 4 times. Like I say, just try and keep it as straight as possible. So right there, it's starting to bind a little bit, so I'm going to turn it back the other way, break the chip, you'll feel it free up, and now it's turning free again. So like I say, just exercise a little patience on this part. Don't get in too big of a hurry if you've never done this before. Like I say, if it starts to get tight on you, just back it off, and then it should free up and you should be able to continue on. Okay, that gives us one more up front here. Okay, so those are those 4 tapped. There's 2 more that we need to do. It's going to be in the middle of the machine right here, and they already have a thread in them, but I like to go through and just chase them out. They're kind of using a semi-self-tapping bolt on these, and so you don't get the cleanest thread, so when you use a regular bolt, it can kind of fight you a little bit. So take your tap and just chase it out. Do the same thing you did there to the holes up front, but there's already threads on these, so we're just kind of cleaning them up is all we're doing here. So like I say, there's 6 locations total. There's the 4 up front and then the 2 right here in the middle of the machine. Once you feel it free up, you know you've made it all the way through and you're good to go. Okay, so that takes care of that. Before we put the plate on, we've got 3 clamps that we need to hang. First one's going to go around the big bar here in the center on the driver's side. You're going to just put it around the tube, and you're looking for it's going to go right in front of where the brake line here that secures to the frame. So just around the tube, make sure you don't get any wiring or anything like that trapped between the clamp and the frame so you don't pinch anything. And then it's pretty much going to butt up. There's a little plastic retainer clip for the brake line. It's pretty much just going to butt up right there against that. The other 2 On the passenger side, it's going to go against this diagonal floorboard here. You might have to pry up the floorboard plastic a little bit. Sometimes it can be a little tight. Sometimes it's not too bad. Just kind of work it in there. And that's going to sit pretty much right against this cross member right here. And then it's pretty much the same deal for the other side. Around that same tube. You see, you might have to pry up the floorboard plastic a little bit or just kind of work it in, but it's not too bad. There we go. And that's also going to pretty much just butt up against that tube. You can move it around if you need to, but that's roughly where they're going to be. So that means we're ready to put our first plate into position here. Okay, so we're going to take your 962 M1 plate here. That's the front belly skid, not the very front. We'll get to that last. So it's the front plate right here. Take it and get it up into position. It's a little awkward, but not too bad. You might need a buddy to help, but and then just get a couple of the cup washers started. Once you get a couple started, you can let the plate hang. We're not going to tighten anything down yet. We're going to leave everything loose so we can move the plate around for adjustability and whatnot. Make sure everything's going to fit together. Okay, so that's pretty good there. Now we can start the bolts for the clamps that we put in. And you'll want to put some anti-seize on these bolts. Anytime we're using one of our clamps or whatnot, it's got a self-locking feature. And you definitely want to put some anti-seize on there. It'll make it a lot easier going in, and then if you ever need to remove it for whatever reason, it'll be a lot easier coming out. You won't have any corrosion or rust fighting you. And again, I'm just starting these. We are not going to tighten anything down yet. This clamp needs to come forward. It's almost there. These can be a little tricky to get aligned. There we go. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so those three are started. Now we can move on to the next plate. On this first plate, you'll see that there's still 2 more mounting holes back here. We've left that out because they're going to be a common mount with this plate. There's an overlap. We've also got 2 more mounts on the side here. We're going to leave those out because that's a common mount for the floorboard skid that comes on after that. So this plate, we've got there's three clamps on this plate as well. Only one of them have to be hung first. The other 2 you can actually get in with the plate into position. But the first one, again, it's going to go around this bar on the driver's side. I gotta say, watch out for any wiring or anything. And then again, it's going to pretty much right up against that brake line fitting there that retains it to the frame. And the other two, they mount up on the side here, but we can actually get to those with the plate in position already. Okay, so with that said, we're ready to put this plate in. Now this plate is, like I said, there's an overlap here, so it's actually going to tuck underneath this first one we mounted up. Okay. Got a couple more holes I need to chase. Like I say, the factory threads on these aren't the best. I don't really like a normal bolt, so I'm going to chase out these back holes here on this part of the frame. That's the threaded ones, the ones that are already have the thread in them. We're not going to cut a new thread in the hole next to it. We're just going to chase out the existing thread. Okay, now we can go ahead and get this plate in position. Once you get the one started, you should be able to kind of let it hang. It's going to be supported by the plate in front of it. Okay, those two are started. Now we can go ahead and put our clamps here. Like I say, you can actually just reach in, and this one doesn't get in the way. You can just hang it around the clamp and line it up. So that one you don't have to do first. Okay, and then we'll start those bolts. Like I say, anti-seize on anything with the clamps. Really wouldn't hurt to put anti-seize everywhere, really, but you definitely want to put it on these clamps that we have. And then we got the one last clamp in the center there. Okay. And then got these two mounts up top here, the common mount. Those are going to be your longer bolt. It's not the gold flange bolt. And again, we're not tightening anything down, we're just snugging it up. Still want to be able to move these plates around and get them all adjusted. So that takes care of those two plates. Now we can move on to the rear. Okay, so the rear, first thing you got to do with this one, so you're going to take your cup washers with your M8 bolts, the 832 8 washer and the M8 bolts. You take the plate, this one also overlaps, so it needs to tuck in. And then there's two holes in the frame here from the factory. You don't need to drill anything. Just gonna line it up with those holes. And get a nut on top of it. Then you can just let it hang. And do that both sides. And we've got the two cup washers up front. And then we've got the two bolts on the rear. And this is another one you might need to chase through again, chase out. Okay. And then that leaves us with two more clamps. Okay, so that's everything started loose, but we've got some other things we needed before we tighten everything down. Okay, so now we have all the plates on with all the hardware started. Everything's still loose. We haven't tightened anything down yet, and we need to leave it loose because we're going to put the floorboards on second. We need to make sure that we have the adjustability that we need to get the floorboards and everything to line up. So let's put the floorboards on. Okay, so you're going to take your longer bolts and the cup washers, and you're going to put the floorboard skin into position. Start the first one. There, get the second one started. And then the last one, like I say, it's the shorter bolts where it's going into the thread in the skid plate itself. Like I say, you want to leave all these plates loose just so you can get everything all lined up, so your cup washers are going to sit down, seat down correctly, whatnot. If you have all these plates tight, you go to put these on and then everything's locked into position. You might not be able to, get it to line up with the mounting holes and things like that. So like I say, we want to leave all that loose. So that's one side. We can go ahead and do the other side now. Like I said, that's where we leave everything loose. I had to kind of shift that around. I could tell that cup washer wasn't going to seat down correctly. It just wasn't quite lined up. So, like I say, if everything's kept nice and loose, then you can get it all lined up. Okay, so that's everything on loosely, so at this point we can just go ahead and tighten everything down. So that's what we'll do. So make sure your cup washers are going to seat down flush. That's pretty much the main thing. If you have everything all lined up, pretty much squared up with each other, all your cup washers should seat down nice and flush, and everything should be lined up, and you can just tighten it down. And I just got the two in the rear, and that's all the 6mm hardware. Okay. Okay, so that just leaves us our the larger bolts, the 8mm bolts and all the clamps. If you can, it's probably good if you can get your hand in there. Just make sure that clamp doesn't rotate off the bar. They're usually pretty good, but sometimes they do. And then that just leaves us the two clamps with the or the two bolts with the nut on it. Okay, and then just come in and grab the nut. Alright, so that takes care of the aluminum belly skids. Now we just have the top piece to do. That piece does require some drilling, so let's move on to that. Okay, so for the last plate for this installation is the top plate, and this plate actually does require some drilling. They've given absolutely nowhere. There's no holes to run nuts or bolts through or anything. There's no way we can put a clamp on. It's all boxed in. So this plate does require some drilling. Okay, so you take your plate, set it up in position, and just start the 12mm bolts. There we go. Okay, so you're just gonna loosely install those, just enough to bring the plate up into position. And probably the easiest way to mark out where we need to drill is take one of your cup washers. I like to use a silver Sharpie. You know, if you have a paint pen or whatnot, anything will work. A black one's kind of rough. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see your mark on a black frame, so that's why I prefer the silver Sharpie. And what you're gonna do, you're gonna take your cup washer and you're just gonna get a Sharpie that works here. And just like I say, mark out the center of each hole. After you've marked the cup washer, kind of double check and make sure that your mark's roughly centered in the hole that's in the skid plate itself. You can be off a little bit, you know, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's room for it to move around a little bit, so. Okay, so that's all marked. And now at this point, it's actually easiest to pull the plate off. Okay, after you have the plate off, you know, everything's marked out. You want to grab a good sharp center punch, and you're gonna come to the center of your marked hole and just give it a smack. And that center punch, it's just going to keep your drill bit from wandering when you start to drill. Okay, those are all punched. Like I said, that's important because if you start to drill and you haven't punched it, your drill bit can walk and wander on you. Where if you've punched it, your drill bit is going to stay right where you want it to be. Okay, so that's all of our holes drilled out. Now we can take our quarter 20 tap. I say not the 6mm. I know it's kind of weird to have different threads, but it's just kind of how this machine worked out. So take your quarter 20 tap and you're just gonna cut a thread at all the holes that we've drilled. Put a little oil on it. Keep it nice and straight. And normally we don't like to drill and tap right into the frame itself. Usually you're going through some pretty thin wall tube. You don't get a whole lot of thread. But they've actually done a pretty good job on this. This is all plate and it's actually pretty thick. So you can actually get a pretty decent thread in this stuff here. And like I say, we don't really like to do this, but they didn't really give us any other option on this machine. So unfortunately you do have to drill and tap a little bit, but it's still nothing as much as what some of the other skid plate manufacturers out there have you do. Okay, so that's all the holes tapped out. Okay, so you take your skid plate, bring it back up. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and start all your cup washers. And as always, we're going to leave everything nice and loose, get everything started. Okay, and the plate's pretty square. Drain holes lined up there. Looks like all the cup washers are going to seat down, so we can go ahead and just tighten all the cup washers. And then we can tighten the top two bolts. Okay, that's it. So that completes the belly skid installation on this machine. So you've got 3/16 aluminum coverage, front to rear, left to right, all the way across. You got these come up to protect the, the footwells and whatnot. You got your floorboard skids on the side. They, wrap up and around nice and tight there. So you got good solid protection for you and your machine. And we've still got the A-arms to install, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. So thanks for watching.